Live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Daily S&M with Rory Sauter and Greg Merck. It is great to be back with all of you. It has been a while. We haven't been live doing this program in probably what, Greg, about a month?
Yeah, it's been a few weeks.
Yeah, I'm glad you and I are back together making this happen. We are ready. We are rolling. We are rocking. A lot to talk about tonight. It's been quite the Tuesday. Headline after headline. Where do we start?
Well, I tell you, we could start with our commander-in-chief and how I think the walls are starting to close in on him. Now, I don't know what will become of it in the impeachment process, but I think it's becoming clear to the millions in America who have blinders on their eyes that just didn't want to believe the truth, that we have all known about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and their cabal and their long history of using their position of power to ingratiate themselves. But it's becoming clearly obvious to everybody in this country that not only did Joe Biden know what his son was doing, but he profited from it in a very huge way.
Yeah, and do we actually think there could be real justice? Do we actually think there could be prosecutions? And not petty ones. I want legitimate prosecutions, like big, hefty prosecutions. We all know that they're talking about charging Hunter with small, minor crimes, but that doesn't do it for us. We want, like I said, full-on justice.
Yeah, well, sadly and unfortunately, they are nothing like us. They don't get the same justice that we get. So the answer to that is my expectation is no, that nothing substantial will become of it. But I do think that it will have a political impact on Joe Biden, or at least it certainly should, because I think there's going to just be no doubt. Once these things start to become more public record, more, from the classified rooms to the public and the testimonies, there's going to be no doubt in anybody's mind, except for the far left, the demagogues who just refuse to acknowledge the truth, and they'll demagogue the issue. But to the rest of the American people, they're going to see it, the smoking gun. There are multiple smoking guns there. And I just don't think there's going to be any doubt in anybody's mind that Joe Biden profited off of his position and for years. And you know what? You know who else is? And while we're indicting Joe Biden, we have to indict Barack Obama because this all happened, much of it right under his nose. And the Clintons are some of the most egregious violators of ethics when they have profited tens of millions of dollars over the years through the Clinton Foundation. Will any of them get justice? No, certainly not the justice that you and I get, but I think there will be a political price to pay.
So you don't see this as political theater like many do. You don't see this as another distraction from a lot of the big problems going on with the wars, with the economy.
Well, we've got everything bad going on right now, but I don't see this as political theater. This is just legitimate. These are legitimate investigations because you take any one of these things. I mean, even the gun charge. You and I are going to jail. What they're investigating.
Long time.
Yeah. So I mean, political theater. If there's ever been a reason to impeach somebody, Joe Biden has demonstrated it 100%. I don't think we've ever had more of a reason, not even close to more of a reason to impeach the president, and on many levels. Not only that, how he compromised himself to our enemies and really accepting bribes, but look at his complete. Well, I won't say mismanagement of the southern border because that is his management. He is intentionally undermining the national security of this country by not securing the southern border, and that alone is an impeachable offense.
Yeah, and isn't it fascinating? And it's obviously troubling, but it makes sense. We don't think it's fair, but we can understand how this system.
I'm losing it. I'm losing your audio a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Better now?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you losing me? How long were you losing me?
You were in and out when you start talking.
What about now? Am I good?
Yeah, not great, but I can hear you.
Okay. So going back to this. So let me actually fix this. I'm going to fix the.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of us garbled. Some digital over bleed over. Looks like Rory's having some technical difficulty. We're gonna get right back here in a couple of seconds as he comes on.
What about now? Am I good?
That's a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So as I was saying, isn't it fascinating? Isn't it mind-blowing how these presidents can get away with not going to jail? They're automatically exempt. You know, I mean, it is mind-blowing in a way, but it's also not, because, you know, we can see how this type of royalty, when you get to this type of level, there's nothing that can hurt you. But it still is not fair. I mean, it's still not fair. They're still human like us. They still live in the same country we do.
Well, I think it also often we look at it, in reverse. We look at somebody who's here and how does he get away from all this? And the truth is, that's how they get to be into these positions. There are certain people throughout history that have gotten away with things, and they start. And I look at our own congressman, how when people, maybe they come from families. Look at the Kennedy families, corrupt families, and here the Gates families. When the families are corrupt and they shield the children, and then the children become the next generation of political leaders, and they're more and more insulated, and the more they become insulated and in that bubble of their own system, the two-tier justice system that they rail against, the very two-tier justice system that they benefit from their entire lives. The reason why they make it to the top to where they're at, these the kind of people whose integrity has been compromised their whole life, is because they were able to avoid, and that's why there may be millions, at least tens of thousands of one-time politicians that never made it to the top because they got cut at the knees many years before. But you kind of develop this aura of invincibility the more you're able to get away with murder, so to speak. And before you know it, you're 10, 20, 30 years into this political system in America. And you just, by the time you're Joe Biden and company, you're untouchable. And some people just are kind of made men, like Barack Obama. He didn't spend decades in the system, but he was a made man from his days back at Harvard. I think that there were a group of people that latched on to Barack Obama and pushed him to the position. So he had this massive network of very deeply connected people that shield the people from the truth of who Barack Obama was. So whether it's that kind of influence or that kind of protection, or the individual who just goes his whole life getting away with murder, that's where they end up in positions of leadership like Joe Biden.
Yeah, the way they buy their way up, the way they make all these deals with all the biggest elites, all the biggest organizations, and it goes on and on.
And the Clintons are the same way. I mean, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton back in Arkansas, I mean, they got away with murder. They're constantly involved. There are multiple scandals that they're involved with. They avoided justice then. And when you avoid, it's kind of like, you get this, you become more powerful when you beat the rap, so to speak. You become more powerful, and then your indiscretions are even greater. And when you get away with them, then you become even more powerful. And then you become this political monstrosity, too many of them, that we see in Washington. And nothing ever happens to them because they've already fought those battles when they could have been jailed, 40 years ago when Biden could have been jailed for whatever he would have done. He got away with it. And so now he'll pay a political price, but the days of putting these people in jail, they're long gone.
No, I agree. How's my audio? Good?
Good.
Okay. In regards to Trump, what do you think he's dealing with going forward? He's been under fire lately. These judges really have it out for him, especially it seems like obviously the one in New York does not like him. The one in Georgia does not like him.
Well, none of these cases to me hold water, but the more Trump stays way ahead in the polls, the more they're going to try to get him out. I really do think, and I agree with Trump. They want to put him in jail. They want him off the ticket because they do fear Trump. These people know that Trump has solid, unbreakable 30-40% of people who, it doesn't matter what he does, the Fifth Avenue, I'll shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. He has those votes. He has to do nothing to get those votes. And he's really vying for, another 15-20%. And I mean, when you look at the black vote and how that's diminishing for the Democrat Party, the Hispanic vote, how all of that is breaking away from Democrats, from Biden, they fear Donald Trump. They fear him. And it's kind of like the same thing that we heard back in 2016. Everybody beats Biden but Trump. Everybody can beat Biden but Trump. And the fact of the matter is Trump was the only person that could beat Hillary Clinton, or it was everyone can beat Hillary but Trump. And the fact is the opposite was true. And they're starting to say the same thing now. All these people, everybody beats Joe Biden except Donald Trump. And I think it's just the opposite. I don't think a Nikki Haley can beat Joe Biden. Ron DeSantis, perhaps, maybe, but I don't think that it's going to be Biden either. I don't know how he makes it to pass the convention, but maybe he does. But they're definitely fearing Donald Trump.
Did you hear Newsom say last week in the debates with DeSantis, Ron, there's something you and I actually do have in common standing up here tonight. Neither of us are going to be the nominee for our own party in 2024. So I still don't buy it, though. I still think Newsom will get in there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he has everything to gain and nothing to lose from that shot. I mean, if it turns out that they draft him at the convention, he doesn't have to. He's not going to answer for that. That's not going to be a handicap for him in the election. Well, you said you weren't going to be none of that matters for him. So that was an easy kind of punch for him to show that DeSantis, you're basically calling DeSantis a failure. You're not going to get the nomination. And he could kind of show himself that way. Look, I'm not seeking it, but you are, so you're kind of failing. I'm not failure because I'm not trying to be. So it was kind of an easy dig for him. He's got everything to gain, nothing to lose by that. But it was pretty weak. I mean, of his attacks on DeSantis, they were very, very weak. And I'll tell you what, he better bring a lot. If he is a nominee, not that DeSantis would be, but if they were ever in a presidential election again, which could happen in 28, he better bring a lot more game than that.
I will say, though, DeSantis has to be more charismatic. He's too much of a stiff out there. I mean, he does have great policies, but he has to get more of a personality. You know that.
Yeah, I don't think that happens, though.
He doesn't have that Trump charisma. He doesn't have that sort of, wooing factor where you can, get everybody, really just rooting for you, filling up a huge rally, a stadium, and Newsom even has much more of a personality, much more style, is much more slick, charismatic than DeSantis. You've even said that.
Yeah, well, yeah, but sure, but where DeSantis makes up,
and that goes a long way with the times we're living in. If you can speak well, if you have that charisma, if you have that, wooing mentality that you can really light up the room wherever
but
you
take
walk.
a person, but you take the the people that are kind of maybe undecided, and DeSantis is to me much more likable. Newsom's a douche, man. He's very easy to dislike. His arrogance is condescending. It turns people off. It's good at first, when you
Right.
when you have it, he's kind of exciting, but after a while, it's kind of like Ramaswamy. I mean, Ramaswamy was when he first came out, he was this breath of fresh air. He was this new energy.
He's got some good ideas. I'm sure Trump will bring him in there. You know, he does bring some fresh new
Right, but
things.
after a while, he became unlikable.
Right.
You know, he's just too much of him. It's like too much of a good thing. Um, you know, you want a little bit of sugar, but if you're eating chocolate all day long, it's just not good anymore. You just don't feel good. That's what Ramaswamy. That's why he's so unpopular now. People just see his arrogance. They see him as too combative. Some people like that, but when you're trying to reach millions of people across personality traits, guys like him, they don't bode well, and that's why I think Newsom loses. Ron DeSantis, his personality, while it does need a little charisma, it's not offensive. So he's not offending anybody. So there's something to be said about, this guy offends people. And this guy over here, he's got more charisma, but he offends people. This guy, he doesn't have the charisma, but he's very non-offensive.
Right.
He's just very matter of fact. He sticks to it, but he's not condescending. He's not arrogant. And I think that where Ron DeSantis loses to Newsom in charisma and personality, he makes up for because it's hard to dislike him.
Right.
And I think Newsom is very easy to dislike.
Do you think DeSantis would take a position in Trump's cabinet?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, I personally don't think that Trump, because he is kind of vindictive, I don't really see him giving DeSantis anything. So I doubt it. I mean, DeSantis is going to run out his, finish
Right.
his term as governor.
And that's why I mentioned he'll be running out his term, in 2026. And if
Yeah.
Trump will be 2 years in. And if DeSantis is bored, or if DeSantis, is offered a job, that's what I'm thinking. Would he take it if Trump? Because I knew because I knew this a while back that his term was going to end in 2026, and that's why I asked the question. I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I mean, a lot could happen. Who knows?
VP. He's not going to be VP at this point, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, who knows? So much could happen. Maybe he runs for the Senate against, Rubio leaves and he runs for Senate. Who knows? Lots of things can happen. Maybe he does take an appointment at that point for, in the Trump administration. He's definitely not through with politics. That's for sure. I think there are those 2 years that are between 26 and 28, where I do believe he'll run again in 28. He's definitely going to be busy.
Right. And I will say that Ramaswamy will more than likely get a high position in Trump's cabinet.
I don't. But what does he bring to the table? I don't. You know what I mean? I mean, to me, what does he bring to the table in the administration? I don't know. I mean, what could he do? Because of course, I'm of the mindset, if I'm going to Washington to be a cabinet position, I got an 80% chance that the cabinet position I'm holding is the one I want to get rid of, because I believe we ought to eliminate all of them, with the exception of the defense and the State Department. The other ones could be eliminated and or combined. What's he going to do? He's going to go in there and have another bureaucracy.
He's great with speaking. He's great with communications.
Right. Yeah. Then maybe make him something in the press. But what's he going to do? What cabinet position could he possibly do? The State Department. He doesn't know his ass from a hole.
What about chief of staff?
Look, that's not a position you give to a novice. That's a very Washington type of job. You really have to know the system. You are micromanaging the president's schedule. So that's not a job for a guy who has no experience in Washington. He's not totally unqualified. He would never get that job. Only the maybe in something in press, but I just don't really see him wanting anything, and I don't really see him qualified to do anything. And what's he going to do?
What about communications director? What about communications director?
What is he? Why would he want that? I mean, go to Washington and make tens of dollars when he can make millions of dollars, in the private sector.
I mean, you couldn't see him as Secretary of State.
Oh, hell no. He doesn't know dog feces about international relations, foreign policy, geopolitical situation. He is horribly, horribly inexperienced, incompetent. He would make horrible decisions. I mean, no, he does not grasp the world that we live in. And really, frankly, I think that there's so many way, way, way better people for that job. And, I think that job really almost requires that somebody have been in the military. I think should be a huge prerequisite for the Secretary of State.
Right.
Look, I think one of the best secretaries of state in my lifetime was Mike Pompeo. And it would not surprise me if Trump would ask him to come back as a Secretary of State.
No, he bashed Trump though. I don't think they're on good terms.
Oh, I don't say he bashed Trump. I don't think.
Oh no, there were a few. If I recall correctly, there were a few times where he went on CBS and CNN and didn't.
While he was Secretary of State.
Yeah, Mike Pompeo after Trump was out of office when
yeah, but I don't. You listen to him now, and he's definitely not. He doesn't attack Trump in any way. I don't think he's alienating himself.
You know what I was really surprised by is.
But by the way, let me finish. They wanted him to run for president, and he flat out. We talked about loyalty. He flat out, no, he's not going to run for president. I guarantee you, he's going to support Donald Trump, but he would not run for president.
Was it loyalty, or do you just think he knew he couldn't win?
Well, I mean, I think it's a combination of two. Like, well, okay, he was part of this administration. I just don't think he has the character to come out there and say, yeah, I worked for President Trump all these years, CIA and the Secretary of State. And now I'm out, or I'm gonna run. I'm not part. I just think it's not his personality and his character.
Right.
He was part of it. Now he's not going to run against it.
Right. And we've already been talking about you and I earlier on the phone today. We talked about the whole Tucker Carlson possibly being Trump's vice president, and I want to get more into that. But I heard another one that surprised me. Ben Carson. I think that's a horrible choice. I think that's probably the worst choice. I mean, I love Ben Carson. Don't get me wrong. Seems like a very genuine, down-to-earth man. No personality, though. Kind of disappeared during the administration. Doesn't really have. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see him as somebody that would fit as a vice president.
I think
maybe bring him back for a cabinet position, sure, because he's a good guy. He means well. He works hard, but not vice president. That's dumb.
No, I don't really see him bringing much. But then again, I mean, realistically, what does the vice president do on a ticket?
Right, but it matters. I mean, it matters. It matters.
Nah, I don't know. I don't think it makes a difference.
No, we've seen, because I believe that there have been a lot of nominees that have picked horrible.
I don't know any president or presidential candidate who lost because of his vice president. I mean, even going back to John McCain. I don't think Sarah Palin, in my opinion, the only reason why I liked John McCain was because of Sarah Palin.
Yeah,
but there'll be those people say she was terrible, but McCain was terrible. McCain was terrible.
Yeah.
Don't go blaming Sarah Palin on that. That was McCain, McCain.
Well, for that, but Merck, for that time, was he horrible or that's?
Oh no, he's always been horrible. He was a jackass, and I'll tell you, I know people they talk about him in his his military career, and when he was a squadron commander, that he was he was a typical ass clown when he was in the Navy. So I never really had a lot of respect for McCain. Ditching his wife for prettier model. I don't have respect for people like that anyway. Right. But look at. If Joe Biden can get elected with Kamala Harris, then you can't stoop any lower as far as your vice presidential pick. You can't stoop any lower than that. And he got elected. She didn't seem to hurt him. Now when it comes to reelection, maybe. I mean, when you look at it right now, I think that Kamala Harris hurts. But when you're talking about a non-incumbent coming to the race, like Trump is not an incumbent. He's going to come with a fresh face. I don't think that someone's going to hurt him per se. I just think pandering to the black vote with Ben Carson, he could do better. I mean, hell, he could get a Tim Scott if he wants to get the black vote.
Right. I don't think Tim Scott's the best choice either.
No.
Even though I like Tim Scott, I got nothing against Tim Scott. Nothing against him. going back to John McCain though, in 2008, was it hard for you to vote for him?
I mean, no, because I despise Barack Obama
Right.
and any Democrat.
But
So no, it wasn't hard
even
for me to
then,
vote.
even then though, you knew he was an asshole, McCain.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've never
Because
had.
there were
I've
a
never
lot
had
of
issues,
people,
no.
there were a lot of people that didn't see his.
He was. He was.
A lot of
You
people
could.
didn't see. I feel like a lot of people didn't see his true colors until maybe 2012 and on. I would say it. It was a couple of years after he ran for president. But when he was running for president, a lot of people were fooled. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, he refused to go after Barack Obama, really take the gloves off. He thought he could take this moral high ground. He stupidly, foolishly suspends his campaign during the crash to go back to Washington. To do what? To do what? Spend more hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to solve a problem that you created? So I mean, he was not a winner to me. He was never a winner, and he proved himself that to me throughout his whole career, and definitely when Trump was president, he was a complete loser. Yeah, that whole he was not going to go after Obama. He just thought it was that's beneath him. He tried to take that moral high ground. And when it comes to politics, as my dad used to say, there lies an honest fighter. So you better get dirty, man, because that guy's not going to take it easy on you. So he was weak. He was just weak. He was physically weak. He was emotionally weak. He was spiritually weak, and he's mentally weak.
No, I hear you. No, yeah, no, I agree. I want to go back to the whole Tucker Carlson thing, though. I think that would be Trump's greatest choice. I think it would be one of Trump's best decisions he's ever made. There's nobody like Tucker, and Tucker has exposed every problem in our country. And I know very well that he would definitely, take all his knowledge and take everything he's learned and go into Washington and be a big part of the change and really fix things for the better. I believe that. And I believe Trump would listen to him on a lot of policy. And we haven't really seen too many presidents and vice presidents be 50-50, but I think it would be that kind of relationship. I think they would be like 50-50 partners. That's how equal, and that's how much they both would be, putting their attention to all the proper legislation and really coming up with the best ways to.
Well, I don't know that Trump really knows much about legislation. He's got his vision of the country, but I do think that and most generally, the vice president has very little to do there, but senators don't. But I do think that Tucker Carlson has a deeper understanding of the economy and some of these
I
issues.
just think he'll be more involved than any vice president we've probably ever seen.
In the legislative part, I think so. And at least I think that Trump would feel comfortable with kind of launching him into Congress and meeting with representatives and senators and to do his bidding for him because he's very articulate and obviously knows the issues. And I think that Trump would have a lot of trust in him that he was going to that he would do right by Trump. But unfortunately, when it comes to policy, a lot of the mistakes Trump had is because he doesn't have a solid core foundation and understanding these issues. So he relied on the people around him, and they led him astray. Go back to the healthcare, Obamacare. He rightly ran on getting rid of Obamacare, and when he came into office, he allowed, rather than having the plan in place, and this is where we're going to go, he allowed the people around him to say, hey, we're not going to get rid of it. We're just going to replace it with something, different, like an Obamacare 2.0. And that failed miserably. And when that failed, then he tried to go back again and then get rid of Obamacare. And if you can't replace it, you're certainly not going to get rid of it. You should have led with get rid of it. And then if that fails, then maybe you try to do a compromise, but you don't go to the compromise first and then go for the nuclear option second. You know what I'm saying? That's you go for, hey, let's get rid of it. If we can't get rid of it, well, then let's see what we can do to make it a little bit better. So all of that was a huge, huge blunder and mistake. And he's not like he got much help from Congress either, whether it's the Senate, McCain, and even McConnell. I mean, the House was with him, but the Senate obviously was not. But again, because he didn't have like this core, he just knew what the hot button issues were. You know, it was the border, it was healthcare, it was Obamacare. He knew what the hot button issues were. He ran on them, and that's right. But you have to know more than just the headlines. You got to really know the details. And, you know, clearly he's not have these, you know, fiscal conservative convictions, because, you know, this is a guy who was writing checks like, you know, throwing money out of helicopters and spending money like a drunken sailor. So, you know, all of that was out the window beyond what he campaigned on. And then the Federal Reserve, you know, Federal Reserve, they're fake interest rates. Well, then he's president and he wants negative interest rates. You know, so none of this stuff is Tucker Carlson. I mean, Tucker Carlson, you know, what he speaks of, he believes in his heart as his core values. And I think that's what would make the difference.
Do you think Trump has learned his lesson this time around, not to print excessive amounts of money, not to ask for interest rates being around -0, not for you know, passing all these bipartisan spending bills, not for raising the debt more than Obama, not for, you know, cooperating with
I'd like to say he's learned his lesson, and he's, you know,
Operation Warp Speed. We can go on and on. All these bureaucrats that he had to fire and continue.
I'd like to think that all those mistakes he made were because he was worried about reelection, and
Right.
since he's not worried about reelection, he would govern a lot more fiscally conservatively. But then again, there's the other aspect of to do the austerity, to implement the austerity that is necessary. It's critical. If we don't do it, America is finished for sure. But to do that, you're going to make a lot of enemies, and a lot of people are going to hate you. And I don't know that Trump could handle that kind of hate, that kind of weighing in on his quote legacy. Even though, you know, who cares about your legacy? Maybe they're not going to like you 10 years from now, but 30 years from now and 50 years from now, they're going to thank God for you, because you will have saved the republic. I don't know that he has that long-term vision. I mean, look at Calvin Coolidge. Look at all of the deficit, the debt that was created under presidents and how it went. And you look under, and it's all positives. And, you know, some it's more, it's $8 trillion for Obama, $6.7 trillion for Trump. But you look at Calvin Coolidge, it's negative. It's negative in the $1 billion. He cut the government. And I'm not just saying cut the rate of growth. He literally cut the debt and cut it out. So, you know, and when you look back at that, you know, all these years later, and you see he was the one, you know, shining hope in our history. And that could be Trump if he does the right things. I just don't know if he has that long-term view, that long horizon to say that, you know what, they're going to hate me for the next 10 years. But beyond that, they're going to love me and thank me because I saved the republic. Because if he doesn't do these things, and I'm talking about even what Nikki Haley's saying, you know, how we have to address Social Security. If we don't do that, the country's finished. We can't do it. We cannot be. We're 33.9 trillion. Before Christmas, we're going to be 34 trillion. Now you think about that. That's 90 days. We went from 33 trillion to 34 trillion. That's 90 days. So you know, that's just 3 months. So what is that? $4 trillion in a year? Is that what we're adding? Because we can talk about deficit spending, but you really got to look at the debt. What is the debt growing? So the debt is growing trillions, not at 1.9 trillion. The debt grew, or 1.8 trillion, like they said, we ran a $1.8 trillion deficit. No, the debt grew 2.1 trillion. So it's not a 1.8, it's 2.1. Well, if we added $1 trillion in 90 days, in 3 months, that's $4 trillion in the year, keeping up this pace. Are we going to run a $4 trillion deficit? It's possible. So we had better do something about government spending. And that means reforming entitlements, and that means austerity. And if we're not willing to accept that, then you know what? Just kiss the country goodbye. We're finished. Just settle for the fact that in 10 years, there's going to be a glorious reset that is going to undermine the way of life for 330 million Americans. And we're going to suffer a decrease in lifestyle such as we have never known before in the history of this country, and for the first time in the history of this country.
And I think they said by 2030 we'll be in 50 trillion debt. Is that about right? Sound about
Well,
right?
that's what I've said. I've said that by 2030, I expect we'll be $50 trillion in debt. It's very possible.
Yeah.
And likely more, if
Maybe
we
more.
continue down this path, where it's very likely, because if we keep these rates for longer, interest rates at 5.25, 5.5, and I don't know that we do, but all of that debt that's getting rolled over every month, we're going to look at a debt service of $2 trillion, $2 trillion just to pay the debt, the interest on the debt. So now think about that. Last year, service on the debt was 400 billion. Now think about going from 400 billion to $2 trillion and maybe more. I mean, if it's 5%, if the rates are 5%, and we're at $50 trillion, that's $2.5 trillion. The average every month we got to turn this stuff over. We turn it over under the new interest rate, which is 5%. When rates years past were 0 and 2%, for 30-year bonds. Now all these new bonds that we're turning over, just look at the interest rates on the bonds. The 2 years, of course, they're coming way down, but we're talking about we refinance hundreds of billions of dollars in new debt from 0.5% to 5%. That's huge. And we got 7 trillion that's going to be refinanced in the next couple of months. $7 trillion of our debt is going to get refinanced, and it's going to go from a very low interest rate to having to be refinanced at a much, much higher interest rate of 5%. And I mean, that's money that we have to pay with our taxes. That interest comes out of our taxes. And when we don't have the taxes to pay, we print more money and sell more U.S. treasuries, go even more in debt, exacerbating the problem. So it's this vicious spiral. And we're going to have to do something that is going to be very painful. And if Trump is not willing to do it, then he's not going to save the republic from economic demise.
And we talked about Trump being able to pull off many of these, let's call them miracles, because they are. These are some big things that he has to deliver on. And I think in order to make that happen, you can't have bureaucrats in there. Is there a way that Trump can, and I don't know if I had this conversation with you on the phone, but I might have. Is there any way that Trump could bring in just all outsiders? Or do you think he has to have a few bureaucrats because that comes with the nature of the business of being in office? How do you?
Yeah, I don't think an outsider guarantees success anymore than an insider guarantees failure. I just think he's got to get the right people with core values. I mean, I think of people like Ted Cruz, who I believe really has core values. I mean, Congressman Massey. I mean, this is a guy who has incredible core values.
Yep.
There are some people in Washington. Rand Paul. This is a guy who really, really is a believer. And there are some smart people, some economic geniuses. I mean, he brought in some great guys outside. He brought in Larry Kudlow. He brought in Steve Moore. I mean, these are great minds. Unfortunately, if Donald Trump is not the leader, if he's not providing the moral framework and the leadership and the guide, these people, you're talking about Larry Kudlow, who's an extreme conservative, fiscal conservative, smart. The guy will tell you about you're spending money. The guy who was, 10 years ago, he would tell you, laugh in your face, you talk about tariffs. But then they come and work for the administration. And now, Donald Trump is leading them down a path, and then they become believers and, buying into it hook, line, and sinker. And we saw that in the conservative media. I mean, how is it that guys like Hannity can praise some of the policies of Donald Trump? They were disastrous. And when you're talking about these, if you're really conservative, and I remember how often he would go down the line of how much money Obama was spending. I mean, here's Donald Trump giving away trillions of dollars out of helicopters, and you're not railing against that. You're not saying this is inflationary. This is going to destroy our country in the next few years. I mean, so it has to come from the leadership. Donald Trump can't bring people in to save him. That was what people don't like George W. Bush. But I'll tell you, the great thing about Bush, what made him an extremely effective leader, is George W. Bush knew what he didn't know. He understood that. He brought people in and would listen to them and wanted to be taught and given the real. Now he was a leader. I think he was a born leader, so he'd make the final decisions, and he definitely had a lot of core values going in there. But I think he genuinely brought people in that he thought would have the edge, whether it was the intellectual edge, the economic edge, or whatever, so he could listen to. So if Donald Trump is not willing to do that, bring people in that are going to truly solve the problems and allow them to run with it, then he's going to handicap himself, and he'll just show himself with a bunch of Saddam Hussein yes men that are afraid to get fired or attacked. I mean, I saw Larry Kudlow kind of change in a lot of ways when he worked for Trump. Things that he did and supported that he would have never done 5 years ago.
Now, let's say in some magical world, and I hope this happens, but I'm not going to hold my breath, and I don't think you are either. Let's say Trump does everything accordingly with economics, and he saves us. What about when he leaves office? Oftentimes, all the success, that the previous president accomplished and prevailed on gets deleted, and new bills come into place, and we get fucked.
Well, that depends on a couple things.
Even if it's a Republican, a lot of times, they're compromised. They get these big donors to tell them what to do. I mean, Trump is obviously compromised and has donors, but not to the extent that these other presidents have in the past.
Well, I think that really depends on how he goes about accomplishing his success. If he does it via, record executive orders, then they can all go away, especially if a Democrat goes to power, just like last time. But if he governs the nation and inspires Congress, and we get a strong Congress, a Republican Congress that will work with him, real conservatives, not ones that are going to oppose him like John McCain, Republicans. But if he passes his agenda legislatively, then you're going to need another legislative procedure to do away with it. But an executive order just takes another signature. It just takes one signature of a new president. But if he does it through the legislative body and legislative process, then he'll secure some changes. And he also has to make them permanent. None of this, they expire, and such and such. You get all these tax credits. They always expire, a day after you leave office. So they need to make permanent tax cuts. They need to get rid of the regulations legislatively, not by executive order, just getting rid of them. And then I think that come, 2028, with American prosperity will be so restored that it'll be like Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush is able to ride right in very easily and handily win. So he can do that, but it really depends. Again, it just depends on how he accomplishes his success. Executive order is not going to cut it.
I do believe, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, especially if another Republican wins. I think there should be something that a rule or some piece of legislation that goes into place that if the previous president is successful, like Trump, if he is, we see when people sell companies and stuff, they stay on to oversee operations and give advice and make sure that everything is still running accordingly. What about having something like that? Especially if another Republican comes on, I think that'd be fantastic.
Well, there's nothing that stops them. There have been presidents that obviously George W. Bush tapped into his father and would have communicated with his father. But Democrats do it. I mean, Obama spoke with Clinton. Look, that's always there if they want advice. But it's a new boss has his own agenda, right. And it's also kind of a sign of weakness if you're going to rely on somebody else. People, they don't want to show themselves as vulnerable or weak or not having a position. Well, I need to ask this guy, hey, come help me. Look, there's always that phone call that you can make to kind of get some advice on certain things, bouncing things off. But president, we elect the president. We don't elect the president to keep the last guy in. I mean, imagine if it's a Democrat. Would you want? I mean, we're already
No,
pissed
no,
off
I'm
that you
talking
got
about
Barack
at the
Obama.
same
Look,
I'm
we
talking
have
at
that
the same-
today. But
No,
we have that
I
today.
mentioned a second ago when I said this that if somebody like Trump is successful and then another Republican wins, like the
Right. Well,
previous
I mean, do
Republican,
you
like
like
Trump
that? Do you like that that Barack Obama's hanging around the White House and all his minions are formulating policy with Biden? You
True.
know,
I guess that's a good way of, yeah. I mean, you're right.
yeah.
Kind of.
And I wouldn't want, I mean, look at like, do they really want to do that anyway? I mean, do they really think Trump is going to want to hang
Well,
around?
something's
the White
going
House?
so well, and we're at risk of getting it all erased.
Well, but that's
I
the
think there should
power
be-
of public
I think there should
opinion.
be a conversation about it. I don't know exactly what the solution or what the answer is, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but we have a system, and we have a system. If that, well, let's say Trump brings us back to, makes America great again, and DeSantis gets elected, and DeSantis is starting to change. Look, Trump is going to go on social media. He's going on television. He's going to say he screwed up everything I did. We need to go back to doing
No, but
this.
what
We need to go
about
back to do that.
here's a problem. Like when these presidents implement great policies, I've seen Republican presidents implement fantastic policies that really benefit the American people. And then I've seen another Republican president come along and completely abolish and get rid of that legislation because they have donors and special interest money telling them to. So, do you understand what I'm saying?
Like,
So
for
it almost
example,
should be like a pledge. If a president puts something in place that is benefiting the everyday worker and there's evidence of it, it should not be able to be reversed. If that makes any sense.
I mean, no, that's not a republic. I mean, elections have consequences. That's what a
I get
republic
it.
does. I mean, well, that's always works great.
But
when
I'm
it's
talking
something
about
you
within
like.
our own party, without so we
Yeah,
don't.
but I mean, yeah,
backstab
but
each
with our
other.
own party, do you want John McCain?
Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. Trump puts in a phenomenal policy, implements it, and then DeSantis comes along and tries to abolish it and get rid of it. But there's proof that it's benefiting the everyday worker, and
We experience that every single day.
I know.
Across every single day with Republicans and Democrats alike, whether it's Republicans reversing, Democrats reversing, Democrats reversing, Democrats, Republicans. That's why we have a republic and we don't have a monarchy where some king makes the law and decree and it never changes. Nebuchadnezzar. We're not ruled by Nebuchadnezzar, who writes a decree and nothing can change it. Sorry, I said nobody bows down and bends. I'm sorry, I got to throw you to the lions because I have this decree, and no matter how much. So we live in a republic, and elections have consequences, and it works great when we don't like the legislation and we can change it.
Right.
We can't cherry pick the stuff we like. And I want to keep that. Well, yeah, we all want to keep it. That's why we keep going to the polls and trying to vote in people that will keep it. And when they don't, we get rid of them.
Yeah. I want to bring this up. Speaker Mike Johnson is selling out, man. He's been really.
Is this a surprise to anybody? I mean, he's not selling out.
No, you got to listen. You got to listen to this. Speaker Mike Johnson tables move to slip deep state reauthorization in defense bill. Listen to this. Mike Johnson on Tuesday reportedly tabled a move to slip a deep state reauthorization into a defense bill. Speaker Johnson has nixed an extension of FISA authority as part of the NDAA. Punchbowl News' Jake Sherman wrote. As Breitbart News has reported, Johnson and other congressional leaders have wanted to temporarily reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, and the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. Section 702 is a controversial government surveillance law, and the proposed move received strong backlash from 54 bipartisan House lawmakers and House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. Yeah, dude, this is bad news, Bears.
Well, I said from the beginning, they expected. Now, I think that Kevin McCarthy did an excellent job for what he was dealt with. I mean, they expected McCarthy to be able to fly to the moon in a Tesla Model S. Okay, it's not going to happen. Well, just get rid of him. So we'll put Johnson in the Tesla. Look, Johnson ain't getting to the moon in a Tesla either. Like nobody could possibly accomplish what these these 8 wanted to accomplish. Johnson was going to do the exact same thing. He was going to be put in the exact same predicament as Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy was not abandoning his principles. He was just playing in the game with what he was given. You know, if you're not given the tools, you don't have the numbers and the people, you just cannot accomplish what they wanted him to accomplish. They simply didn't have the numbers. So, look, I like Johnson. I think he's a very highly moral, ethical guy. But if you thought he was going to be able to accomplish what Kevin McCarthy was not able to, you just were naive, or ignorant. For those who thought Johnson could do more than McCarthy, they're either naive or ignorant, or they're liars. And I think that's a lot of those people like Gates are just liars.
The fact that he's going along with this though is disgusting, and he's a sellout, and he's a punk, and
he's not look, they're trying to portray it. He's not going along with anything. If you said, "Hey, you're king for a day, Mr. Speaker," what would you do? He's going to do something completely different. He's dealt a hand. You cannot beat a royal flush if all you got are a pair of threes.
Right.
Look, you don't beat a royal flush. Sorry, you just cannot do it. You can't do it. And you know what? You can't even bluff because the guy's got a flush. You ain't going to bluff him. He's going all in. I think the expectations are just so high for Johnson. And I look at people like Gates who pull all his shenanigans. Look, Gates was about Gates himself. He was not ideological driven in this whole thing. The guy's never gave a damn about the debt for 1 second. He hijacked anything he said about the deficit and about spending from my campaign against him. So he never has any ideological bone in his body when it comes to saving money. He wanted to save his own ass because he wanted to shut down the ethics investigation into him. He didn't want to be another George Santos. So he's not kidding anybody with that. The guy doesn't want people to know who he is. So he hides in his little closet. And frankly, I don't even know how he finds room in the closet with all the skeletons crowding him out. The guy is a complete fraud. But if you thought that Johnson was going to give you more than McCarthy, that's just at the very best naive.
No, I know. I remember we talked about him a few months ago and we had optimism, but we weren't going to hold our breath. We knew it was an uphill battle to pass the proper agenda and the America First agenda. It's just, you can't.
Okay, we don't have the Senate. Okay,
yeah.
we're down in the Senate, and we have a very tiny minority in the House.
True.
And they actually got some real cuts. I mean, some 8% cuts in discretionary spending. They actually made some real headway. But the Republican squad voted against it because they wanted to torpedo McCarthy. And they blew it and just kind of set themselves back. Now accomplished nothing. I mean, I probably like Johnson a little better than McCarthy on a moral, level, because I think he's a genuine article. But that's not to say that I think that McCarthy's immoral. I just don't think he's the godly Christian convicted guy that Johnson is. But you know what? In Washington, that doesn't mean a whole lot of beans.
Right. That's true. It's true. Liz Cheney. Ugh. Speaking of Washington, speaking of all this, we were talking about, Trump and who he might select as his VP and, other things in that nature. We got somebody else who we talked about Kennedy, about a month ago on this show. And now Cheney is talking about a possible third-party run. I don't understand why. Maybe she just likes to hear herself talk. That's all I can really resort to.
I didn't even think would she. I even thought it sounded to me when I heard her talk that she would even consider as a Democrat. She didn't rule it out. Right. I didn't get from her words and listening to her and even seeing her facial expressions that she would run as a third, that she's committed. I'm not yet committed whether I would run as a third party. She's up in the air. Is she run a Republican? Could she run as a Democrat? I didn't see her ruling anything out. She didn't make that clear at all. She just said, in the next couple of months. But I mean, that could mean she's going to be a Democrat. Who knows? I really think that it's disgusting what she has become. Just a foul, disgusting person. And, this whole, we got to save democracy. That's all a bunch of horse manure. And those are liberal, radical left talking points. And if anybody doesn't see that this administration, far and beyond anything Trump could ever do, is not only a threat but has systematically undermined and destroyed the republic, then there's just no dialogue with that. That's just demagoguery at its worst. And you're not going to have any real debate with somebody who does not see this administration as having aggressively undermined and dismantled our republic.
Yeah, no, agreed 100%. And while we're on this whole president topic, there's a new poll out. 49% of ages between 18 to 29 years old definitely won't vote in this 2024 election.
Hallelujah.
49% of 18 to 29-year-olds definitely will not vote for a presidential candidate, down 8 points since 2019. An Institute of Politics at Harvard Kennedy School poll found Tuesday. The potential lack of young voter turnout will likely benefit former President Trump in this anticipated 2024 rematch against Joe Biden. The poll found voters under 30 support Biden over Trump by 11 points in a 2024 rematch, 41-30. Only 38% of Black Americans under 30 said they will definitely vote in 2024, down 12 points from 2019. Only 40% of Hispanic Americans said they will definitely vote in 2024, down 16 points since 2019. The downward trend is poor news for Biden, who relies on young voters for support. Voters under 30 supported Biden over Trump by 24 points in 2020. And voters under 30 represented 15% of all 2020 voters. Voters under the age of 30 made up 38% of new or irregular 2020 voters. The Harvard poll sampled over 2,000 people between 18 to 29 from October 23rd to November 6th, with a plus 2.86% margin of error. Interesting.
Well, I can only hope that it's true. I think the average 18 to 30-year-old does not know nearly enough about politics to make a informed decision on who should lead the most powerful country in the world. So I just assume they stay home. It's a good thing that they stay home. I don't know if they will, but do us a favor, stay home.
The media, especially the left and all these stupid propaganda machines, like to spew the nonsense narrative. Young people are the future. They're going to come out to vote. They're going to save democracy. Well,
just look at young people are doing today. Right. You've got a terrorist organization that did an attack that was 10 times our 9/11 in Israel, and they are protesting, students all over this country protesting in favor of the terrorist organization Hamas. So I mean, they don't even know what they're protesting. They have no idea. And then you have the radical, the alphabet symbol group that are protesting against Israel. Don't they realize that Hamas would have a heyday with those people? I mean, how do you support and protest in favor of people that will kill you right where you stand? That they would literally cut your head off right in the street. How could you possibly protest in support of these people? But they do, and so I just assume they all stay home.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely helps Trump. There's no doubt about it. And I want to bring this up. Democrats are really fucking bored in DC, man. I'll tell you. Chuck Schumer is pledging to bring assault weapons ban to the Senate floor this week. Here we go again. Yep. He announced Monday night on Twitter, on X, that he will be bringing an assault weapons ban to the Senate floor this week. Jesus.
Well, good luck with that. I know certainly Biden would sign it, but it'll go to the Supreme Court if it does pass. I don't see that I don't see it as possible to pass. I mean, look, this is what cracks me up.
It was a thing though between 1994 and 2000. Remember Clinton?
Yeah, but you look at it, it was not really. It was you had to do with suppressions, and it didn't get rid of the AR-15s. It just changed some components on them. It wasn't assault weapon ban. I know because I bought
So
my
this is
assault
much
weapon.
more severe, detailed,
Yeah, it'll
extensive.
never pass. It'll never pass. I don't. I mean, I still think it is. But here's the thing. This is the same group of people that says, we've got all these illegals flooding in the country, and I think they're attacking DeSantis because he says he's going to deport 10 million of them. These 10 million that have come in, and you're just kind of laughing at them. Okay, you seriously think you cannot deport 10 million human beings, but you're going to come and take my AR-15s? You seriously think that you can go to all the millions upon millions of homes that have AR-15s and these assault rifles, and you're going to confiscate them? You're going to do that? How? Good luck with that. Good luck with that. So I would suggest using your money and your resources to get rid of illegal aliens and criminal elements that kill, rape, and murder and steal and are a threat to our country's national security, and spend your money getting rid of those people, and not try to get rid of people like me and take our assault weapons away, which, oh, by the way, just look to Ukraine. We're going to spend another $60 billion to Ukraine. Okay, this is a country that's handing out machine guns and ammunition to its citizens to arm the citizens against a Russian invasion. But I guess we don't have to worry about that because we're in the United States of America. We don't need, here, you can take all our assault weapons and take all our guns because we don't need them. Well, why do you think that nobody invades us? You think that just because we're the United States of America and people love us that nobody invades us? Don't you think for 1 second the fact that we have defended the Second Amendment for 250 years almost, don't you think that might have a little bit to do with it? Oh, I can tell you that it absolutely does, because the Germans and the Japanese thought long and hard about invading our countryside because of that very fact. And how much more today when Americans like myself are armed to the teeth with thousands of rounds just because I can. Why? Because I can, because the Constitution says I can. And so they ought to take that into serious consideration. The fact that our borders have been safe from foreign invaders other than terrorists, and they ought to realize that has a lot to do with the Second Amendment.
Yeah, no, and you brought up Zelensky. He appealed directly to U.S. senators on Tuesday, seeking assurances on approval for delivery of the next tranche of aid and lethal military equipment to his embattled country. This guy is something else. He's quite the actor. He's quite the scumbag.
He's a lowest of lives. He wants another 60 billion, and Biden wants to give it to him. And here's the thing: if you go back to Afghanistan, the hundreds of billions of dollars that we gave to Afghanistan, and we were paying for their soldiers, we were paying for their security forces. Many of them didn't even exist. Many of them did not exist. So, in other words, they say we've got 300,000 security personnel, and there's X amount of dollars per security personnel, whatever, 10,000, 20,000 per security personnel. They only have like a fraction of that. So we're giving them money to fund people that don't exist. Are we doing the same thing in Ukraine? We're giving all this money to these people and to support their forces. Do they even have these forces? I mean, where is this money going? The answer is we have no damn idea where that money's going. But we can reasonably expect, because that is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, just like Russia, we can reasonably expect that a lot of wealthy oligarchs in Ukraine are getting wealthier with our money. I'm sorry. It is a national security issue. If it's a national security threat to us, no. Is it in America's best interest? No. Is it a threat to the United? No. So I'm sorry, Ukraine. You're going to have to negotiate this one on your own. This is 2 years now. What? In a couple of almost 2 years? And billions of our tax dollars for what? For what? They're killing each other left and right over there. They haven't gotten a shred of land one way or the other, gotten it back. All they're doing is burning up U.S. tax dollars and killing each other. I don't see that that's a good investment. I don't think that is a smart track that we're on in signing more checks so that they can kill each other. You're accomplishing nothing, zero. This is like a stalemate of killing each other. And oh, by the way, Russia will win in the end. There's no way little Ukraine is going. It's just not going to happen. So
Right.
what are we doing? Is this compassionate to me? Unfortunately, we've gotten ourselves into a corner right now where if we don't beat Russia, it's a huge black eye for America, because Putin is going to use it to he's going to sensationalize it, and he's going to use it for propaganda that we defeated the Americans. So this jackass of a clown that we have as a president, just not only did he put us hundreds of billions of dollars in debt for the Ukrainians and enrich the Ukrainian oligarchs, but he's given them a massive propaganda tool to show how they defeated America. No, it should have way at the beginning. Of course, under Trump, this would have never happened. I get it. But they should have, Biden should have been committed to negotiating some kind of peace settlement very early on, billions and billions of dollars ago, but he didn't. And now everybody is worse off. Everybody. Mostly us.
And isn't it fair to say that 90% of Washington, D.C. is enriching themselves off this Ukrainian war with money laundering? Because we see on both sides how so many of them, the majority of them on both sides, are all for sending more and more money. And the only thing I can think of and resort to is they're enriching themselves. Why else would they have any interest in a foreign war that they know that they know Ukraine's losing? It just doesn't.
I mean, it does a lot of look at. I don't know that 90%, and I don't know how
It's
many.
a lot, though. It's more than not.
I don't think they have to be getting paid any. You know, all it takes is one person, one powerful person like Joe Biden, who's clearly compromised. I mean, obviously, his son, Burisma, Ukrainian, clearly compromised. So now you have the entire party that is going to support what Joe Biden wants. And so they don't even have to be taking a penny. They're going to support their man. They're going to support their leader. They're going to support Joe Biden. And I think a lot of the Republicans are just on this, this Lindsey Graham, I hate Putin. Putin's the devil. Zelensky's the greatest guy since sliced bread. We got to support the Ukrainians. I think they're just wrong, just politically, geopolitically wrong. And then their logic, I think, is flawed. And I think that their read on the whole situation is wrong. But people don't have to be paid off. There are a lot of believers in Washington that really think that this is, a moral thing to help the poor innocent Ukrainians. And look, I get it. Putin's a bad guy. He invaded them.
You got to put feelings and facts. Yeah. You got to put the feelings aside and go off of facts. And they don't do that enough. It's like,
and we saw this coming. We saw this coming, and
like
all
you
we
said,
had to do,
moral, like they're like in reality, what they believe is not the facts. If they
right. Well, it's their morality.
Their heart is in the right place. That's not what they're elected to do, and we don't care about their hearts.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's their moral, and sometimes their hearts are. If they think it's right, but it's not. It's not a moral decision. I think it's immoral to do what they're doing. But you know what? All we had to do was tell Ukraine, listen, you don't get into NATO. And this whole NATO expansion thing, that's what started this. Putin did not want NATO to become, or Ukraine to become a NATO country. That should have been easy. We could have, done some back channel diplomacy and assured Putin they're not going to come into NATO. That's just not going to happen. They can submit all the applications they want. It's not going to get approved. We're not going to allow it to happen. And then this would have never happened. But now we want to let everybody know. I mean, look at Turkey. Turkey's in NATO. What a huge, massive mistake that is. This is a country that routinely threatens to attack another NATO country in Greece and is occupying certain islands. So, talk about violations of, Article 2 of the NATO treaty. I mean, Turkey's a horrible member. The last people we want to bring in are countries like Ukraine. We already got to deal with cesspools like Turkey and Erdogan. So all we had to do was assure Putin that was not going to happen. But no, because Joe Biden was compromised, we're now in this mess that the taxpayers are footing the bill for. And who knows how long it's going to go on for? I mean, how much longer can it go?
Well, apparently Ukraine is locked in, and it's just a matter of time until they get accepted to NATO. It's inevitable. I mean,
and now we got the war in the Middle East, in Gaza, and that's That's going to start
And
siphoning.
Taiwan and
Zelensky's hating that. Zelensky,
China, Taiwan's coming probably before the year's over.
yeah, I don't know if that's going because I think what's holding
China's
that up.
economy struggling. You think they'll hold
It's
back for a
hurting.
while?
Yeah, they're hurting big time. They're in big
But
trouble.
but Greg, if they hold back and wait too long, that's not good for them. That would be stupid because then Trump comes back in, and then they wouldn't pull that because they know he would hold them accountable in about 2 seconds. He would make sure China pays a price.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know that.
I don't think Trump, despite his flaws, he's got his issues, but I don't think Trump would let China take Taiwan. I don't
But look,
think he would.
China. But see, here's the thing: China doesn't have to do stuff right now. They're very patient, very very patient, and they definitely play the long game. And I'm talking like decades and decades and
Yeah.
centuries. They play the long game. So if they cannot do it until if Trump gets elected, they got no problem holding off, waiting, continuing the de-dollarization that they're doing, buying their time, and doing it after Trump if they thought Trump was going to be a threat. But I honestly don't think they look at who the U.S. president is whether or not there are much bigger things that are driving China's decision to invade Taiwan, bigger than who the U.S. president is. And you've got Trump. I mean, the Chinese aren't stupid. They know Trump is a anti-war, very anti-war. So I don't know that Trump in office is necessarily threatening to China. Trump doesn't like to go to war. He doesn't go to war for anything.
Right. But he hasn't really needed to because all these other world leaders seem to have they have a sense of respect for him.
Well, and he's smart enough to know he could use strikes, individual targeted strikes to kill people and take people out. I mean, it's
Right.
not like we weren't at war with ISIS in Iraq and the Caliphate. I mean, he wiped them out. Under his administration, we were attacking them relentlessly, but it wasn't an all-out, invasion. But I do think that China plays the long game, and they consider bigger things that transcend who the U.S. president is, whether he's a Republican like Trump or a bozo like Biden. Because that's the case, they're walking in there and just cleaning up house right now under this idiot Biden. So clearly, there are bigger things that are driving their decision making, and I think number one is de-dollarization. So,
Yeah, the de-dollarization thing is a big deal. It's a big deal. Putin, we were talking about him a second ago, is going to visit Saudi Arabia this week. So the troubled Middle East is about to have a new diplomatic player on the ground, with the Kremlin announcing Vladimir Putin will travel Wednesday to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Putin will journey to the two countries for a flying one-day working visit, which he will meet the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Russian state news agencies TASS and RIA Novosti said, citing the Shah Telegram channel and Russian news website Life. Putin will visit Saudi Arabia, where his negotiations will primarily be with the Crown Prince, shortly after making a trip to the UAE. The Shah Telegram channel quoted presidential aide Yuri Yushkov as saying, AP reports. The UAE is currently hosting the COP28 UN climate change conference, but it's not clear if Putin will attend. What do we think Putin's going to be talking about in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE? Why is he?
well, I imagine he's going to talk about how the United States is destabilizing the region. Who knows? Maybe talking about. I'm sure he's not liking the oil prices, getting into the 70s and 80s. Finding ways to step up that. How can we get the price pushed back up to 80 and 90, 100?
And I know Saudi Arabia is one of those countries that is doing a lot of deals with China and Russia, and and they're against the U.S. They're if a World War III came down, they would definitely align with China, with Russia, with all these other countries. So I wonder if that's what they're talking about too. That possible scenario.
Yeah. I mean, look, the other thing Putin is not liking this war he's in.
No.
And it's
And to
costing
be
him a
and to
lot
be
of money.
fair, and this has been reported. Even Tucker reported this, and other people reported this. Putin, on a few occasions, this was like a year ago, offered Zelensky, let's have a ceasefire, let's just stop. And Zelensky said, "Fuck you, I want." Basically, we all know why Zelensky did this, because he wants the money. It's very simple. Putin said, "Let's just stop." And I'm not, condoning Putin's behavior as a person. We obviously know he's done atrocious things, but in this scenario, in this case, he was the voice of reason, and Zelensky said, "No, not interested, man."
Because Zelensky's getting billions and millions and millions
Right.
of dollars.
Right.
And not just for we're not just talking about bullets and bombs. We're talking about money he's got people getting paid, he's got local businesses getting paid, he's got security forces, all his security forces getting paid, probably like getting paid 3 to 1 because we're getting a check for 3 when we only have 1. So he's getting like triple the pay. So I mean, this guy, it's a windfall profit for this guy. We're literally funding and financing his entire government. And it's just disgusting that the people in Washington are so freaking ignorant, stupid, that they're allowing this to happen. And it's just wrong. Only a handful of Republicans in Washington have seen the puppet show and are going to say no to it. But unfortunately, I just don't think there's enough of them.
No, I hear you. And we were talking about oil and Saudi Arabia. Did you see the new report? Saudi Arabia says absolutely not to fossil fuel phase down demand by climate crazies. I mean, it's Saudi Arabia. It's like the #1 place for oil. Do you think they're going to give in to this climate change bullshit? I mean, seriously, look at all the money that comes from Saudi Arabia with the gas, with the oil, with all this stuff, with all the. I mean, come on. Saudi Arabia's energy minister rejected any phase down of fossil fuel now or in the future on Monday, using an interview at the UN's COP28 conference to reject the increasingly strident demands of climate activists. These climate activists have some nerve. AFP reports a tentative phase down out was included in a first draft of an agreement on climate action delegates are haggling over during talks that are scheduled to finish on December 12th. If successful, it will end all new oil, gas, and coal projects. But Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salomon's half-brother of de facto ruler Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told Bloomberg that Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil exporter, rejects the proposal outright. So there's no way.
Well, it's what the United States should be saying. We've got probably 1,000 years worth of natural gas and oil in our own country.
Right.
We've got so much energy in our own country. It makes the entire world look pathetic. And yet we're just throwing it all away. And I think China's building a new coal plant, every month? I mean, if you're going to do something, let the free markets do it and do it on their own. There are ways that they can trap some of these carbon emissions. Frankly, I think it's a complete waste of money. There's something to be said in pollution and smog and for cities, but this whole climate change agenda. But it's not about the planet and running out of energy and having a clean source and saving the environment. It's really about control. And when people have combustion engines that run on gasoline, they can take those cars and go wherever they want, whenever the frig they want. And seems just simple and elementary, but that is exactly what the tyrants and the authoritarians do not want. They want to be able to control the masses. And when 300 million Americans can do what they want, when they want, and drive where they want, they just can't have that. And really, the whole, it's like they're getting sucked in, because they'll suck you into this. Hey, we're going to save the planet and your children. It's your future. We're going to get you in this electric car, but it's impossible to sustain the power requirements to support all these electric vehicles. So the next step then will be take the car away. And now you don't even have the car. Now you're going to have to rely on mass transportation, if you even have that. Or you build these little communities where you don't have to drive anywhere, because it's all this kind of,
15 minutes.
self-contained. And
15
so
minutes.
it's all about sucking you in.
You're talking about the 15-minute cities, right?
Yeah. And it's just it's boiling. We're boiling the country to death. The frog in the pan scenario, boiling us to death. And eventually we get to the point where we're dead. We're not able to do anything. So the electric car thing, it's just all part of a process, not to give you a different kind of car. Eventually you'll have no car because you cannot have a million, 100 million vehicles and trucks. You can't have that and all be on an electric grid. It's just not possible. Not possible. So
But-
you won't have a car.
Yeah, and the EU chief demands trillions for the green agenda at the UN climate summit. I mean, it's going on everywhere. Now you have Joe Biden, the administration promising $3 billion to gift to UN Green Climate Summit. Jesus, the Biden administration announced Saturday it is sending $3 billion in U.S. taxpayer funds to the UN's flagship Green Climate Fund in a move applauded by climate special envoy
Americans ought to
John
be
Kerry.
disgusted. Americans ought to be disgusted by that. Look, Americans ought to be. It's funny because when I was at I was considering running for Congress in 2016, and I went to one of the debates, and there were like 5 candidates up there, 6 candidates, and they asked them what they think about the UN, and not a single one of them said what I would have said at the time and say right now. The UN needs to be eliminated immediately. We need to just kick the United Nations out of Manhattan. Privatize, take that building and sell it to a company that can make millions of dollars on it. And then every company that pays rent in there will pay taxes, and there'll be massive amounts of revenue to that, pretty much bankrupt city. We need to get rid of it and get out of the United Nations. There's nothing good for America in the United Nations. It is a haven for anti-American sentiment. It is a haven for anti-Israel sentiment. They never promote America's best interest. Quite the exact opposite. They're always promoting things that are antithetical to liberty for the American people. It is the most vile organization that the world has ever known in terms of its attack on America. It's not only passive aggressive attacks on America, but overt attacks on America. It's time we get out of the United Nations, kick them the hell out. It's our building. We own it. Get lost. And not only that, but they come to the United States, these diplomats, year after year after year, and they rack up these bills that they never pay. So they stick the local businesses with the bill, and they got to sit on it and not get paid, whether it's hotels, restaurants, hell, the parking violations, in the millions of dollars every year. Yeah, we never see any of that money. But you know what? You and I, you park in that no parking in New York, it's $100 ticket, and you had better pay it or your license is going to be gone. But these bozos, they don't care. And they just riding on American taxpayers. It's time we get out of that organization and kick them the hell out.
No, I agree. We should have defunded and got rid of the United Nations a long time ago. We were talking about electric cars. You're gonna find this hysterical. 0 electric vehicle chargers built so far, with $7.5 billion with a B allocated by Congress. Despite Congress having allocated billions to building electric vehicle chargers across the United States at the behest of Joe Biden, not a single charger has been built so far with the funds.
Does anybody think the government does anything right? I mean, look, if the private sector wants to build them, let them build them. I mean, can you imagine, 100 years ago that we're going to build gas stations? The taxpayers were going to go build gas stations? I mean, imagine that. So for the last 100 years, the U.S. government has built. First of all, you know how much a gas station would cost if the government was building it? It'd be a $50 million operation. Private sector can put $2.5 million and have a brand new raceway. Build a Buc-ee's gas station for $5 million. I mean, the government can do nothing right. It always costs them 10 times to do it, and they never do it right, and it's always broken. It's just disgusting. And why are we paying? Why are we paying to build these things anyway? If Elon Musk wants to pay, let them. Let Chevy build them. Let Ford, GM, whomever. Let them build the damn stations, charging stations. Why the hell should taxpayers? Why should I pay? I despise these stupid ass electric vehicles. Why should my tax dollars go to build somebody a charging station? You want to have your stupid faggoty ass vehicle? Then you figure it out. Go pay $750 and get the plug put in your garage and charge it in your own damn garage. Why should I pay for your charging station?
Now, are we going to see a time in the future where these electric vehicles will cease to exist?
Well, no, yeah, they'll cease to exist because nobody, you can't charge them. Only the elites will have them.
Right.
I mean, look, it's just they want to get it's a ruse, man. It's a bait and switch. They're trying to bait you into getting a car that's friendly for the environment. But like I said, blank is never about blank. It's always about fundamental change, and that fundamental change includes control and wealth redistribution. They don't want you to get an electric car to save the environment. They want you to get you an electric car because eventually you won't be able to charge that electric car, and they'll take it away, and you'll be completely at the control of the government, local government, state governments, federal government. They're not giving you an alternative car. They're taking your vehicle and your ability to transport yourself away eventually. Now, it doesn't happen immediately.
Right.
But look at the 45 communist goals. That was written in 1962 or 63. Yeah, I mean, so they play this long game. 25, 30 years from now, maybe there won't be any vehicles on the road unless it's mass transit, or the uber rich will have their vehicles.
Yeah, and then we got flying cars coming into play.
Yeah, right. And who's going to have those? You think the average Joe is going to have a flying
I
car?
would say within 20 to 30 years, the average Joe will have them.
No, he won't. The average Joe isn't going to have the ability to buy them and to charge
but eventually,
them.
like most things, they'll become affordable after they've been on the market for a while. They'll start making flying cars.
It sounds good, but it's not possible. I mean, we cannot control people's lives on the road in 2 dimensions. I mean, how do you
road rage? Can you imagine fly rage?
Somebody think about it.
Air rage.
Somebody rear ends you at a stoplight. Maybe your neck is hurt. Maybe you get in the ambulance. Maybe you get out. Maybe you get in a fight. You say, "What that?" Somebody rear ends you in the sky. You both fall and get blown up. And then you kill a bunch of people on the ground. Look, this is all pie in the sky and all sounds good, but I got news for you. Cities with, like they see in the movies, well, that ain't going to happen. Now, maybe they'll have some kind of, Elon Musk, collision avoidance thing. But look, we got way more problems that we need to solve before to even for the preservation of mankind in of itself that is at stake right now before we ever get 50, 80, 100 years into the future. Really seriously think that the pace that we're on, that mankind is going to last 100 years? I don't think so. I mean, I look at what's going on in the world, and man, I can't see mankind lasting 50 more years of this.
Yeah, dude, it's a crazy time. And we were talking about the economy. I mean, going back to this though, you don't think the flying car thing in your lifetime, you don't think you'll see it?
I mean, I might see like one person or a couple of wealthy people that might have some kind of vehicle that they can, jump in and fly. But, I mean, it's just extremely dangerous. I know as somebody who flies in airplanes, and I've also flown helicopters. I mean, just putting these things in the air, I mean, something bad happens in the air, you're plummeting to your death. It's not like you're go in the ditch, maybe I get hurt. I flip my car over. And I mean, bad things happen, 1,000 feet off the ground, and it isn't the fall that kills you. It's a sudden stop at the end. It's not pretty.
How would they regulate this, and what kind of permits, what kind of licenses? I mean, this is stuff that has to be discussed.
Well, anything airborne you'd have to have a FAA. Look at they can't even keep up with UAVs. All these little drones that people have,
right?
That is a huge regulation. And 10 years ago, they started, they started this whole thing where the FAA is getting involved. You got to have licenses if you're going to operate these things. It's a whole new thing. So now you're going to put people in these things. You would have to have a incredibly advanced anti-collision system. I mean, think about it, multi-vehicles in the city, and where you got to come down in between the cities, you can't even imagine. I mean, you've been into Manhattan, you've been in big cities, going in between the buildings and the roads. It's like not a lot of space in there, and you're going to have these vehicles going I just don't see it happening for 100 years at least. At least, I mean, I don't think mankind lasts that long.
What do you think happens to mankind?
I think we blow ourselves up and God judges and God comes again and returns. So, yeah, I think that we end up in massive, massive amounts of wars and pestilences and disease, and a very large part of the population, percentage of the population dies. And I think the final battle in the Valley of Megiddo. That's what I think.
What will be the main big event that kills us all?
Well, it's not a main event. I do believe that in
Nuclear
the
war?
second return of Christ that he comes, I think that there'll be a large gathering in the Middle East in the Valley of Megiddo, which they will call as an Armageddon. What they call the Battle of Armageddon is the area is the Valley of Megiddo, and I think it's going to be the world's forces against Israel. I think it's going to be a massive. I mean, what we're seeing now is just a prelude. It's just a hint of what is to come for Israel. But at that time, Israel will have no friends. It'll be Israel against the world. And I think that's where they come, and then they'll recognize Jesus as their Messiah and will usher into a new era. But I don't think that that's very far in the future. I mean, first of all, it is a time and a dispensation that's marked by heavy totalitarianism control. You can't buy or sell without a particular specific mark. And now we look at that right now with the chip technology. Right now, the UN 50 and 5, they want 50 nations in 5 to have a digital identification, which will facilitate not only identification for the person, but be able to facilitate the buying and selling and transfer of data. So they're working on that right now in the United Nations. They want 50 nations in 5 years to have implemented a digital identification. And it will manifest itself most likely in a small chip that will be implanted. That's what they're looking to do right now. It's not sci-fi stuff. It's not conspiracy theorists. This is what is going on right now as we speak, and it's spearheaded by the United Nations. So, I mean, and anybody that reads, the Revelation 13, 18, you can't buy or sell without the mark. I mean, we're right there. You can't make this stuff up better and make it fit better. It's the reality.
Do you think everything could end with a nuclear bomb that comes to
Not
the US?
everything. I think there'll be lots of nuclear bombs, and there'll be millions of
No,
people.
but you do think that will be one of the things that ends us and ends this country? Is that what you're kind of hinting at?
I think eventually there'll be nuclear bombs, nuclear warfare that will kill tens of millions of people. But that'll only be part of it. You also, I think we have, diseases right now. Just look at the kind of warfare, China and developing this gain of function, the COVID virus. They talk about disease and pestilence. So I think it'll all be part of it. I think you'll also see where waters are polluted, and the sources of water becomes polluted to the point where there'll be mass starvation, dehydration, people dying, not getting clean water. Yeah.
Jesus.
The whole gamut, you name it, the whole gamut: disease, bad water, agricultural problems, issues, wars, nuclear war, nuclear holocausts. You name it. It's going to be all culminating. It's going to be chaotic times.
Right. No, I hear you. And it's, we're definitely living in times like never before. I mean, unrecognizable. So there's some economic things. I mean, so we're hearing a lot of mixed opinions. We're seeing a lot of bad things, but we also have people that are having tremendous amounts of optimism. For instance, Wall Street analysis is optimistic for 2024, but they were also optimistic for the last couple years, and we saw how that turned out. So I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. Pending home sales have dropped to a record low, even worse now than during the financial crisis. And another thing that caught my eye: November saw the biggest corporate buybacks on record, and then the mortgage rate has, in order we can talk about this mortgage rate thing after, but those three things I just mentioned, I mean, the Wall Street analysis is optimistic for 2024, which I said doesn't really mean much. I mean, because their predictions have been wrong in the last couple of years. Pending home sales dropped to a record low, even worse than the financial crisis, which really is catching my eye. That's terrifying. And then the whole November saw the biggest corporate buyback on record. Interesting.
Well, I will say this. First of all, if you remember, probably, I don't know, maybe it was a year ago or less than a year ago, when the interest rates were rising, I've said that the end of the U.S. housing market is going to come when, at the time, they were the interest rates were below 7%. I said when 7% is the support, not the ceiling, but the support. So we broke 7%. We actually broke 8%. But it seems right now that 7% is the floor. Like it's not going below 7%. I think it hit maybe the average 7.11, 7.2, 7.3. But now we're at that point where 7% is the support. That's the bottom. That's the low end. And we're seeing that the housing market is starting to collapse and crumble. People are not getting out of their houses. They're not selling their house because if they have to buy another one, they're going to have to, get an 8% mortgage on it. They're not going to do that. So they're staying in their houses with 4% and below mortgages and not getting out. So it's cutting the supply of homes out there and people are kind of staying put. And then the people that want to buy can't afford to buy. The price of the house is way up. The insurance of the house is way up. The tax on the house is way up. And then the interest now on the mortgage is way up. So it's just this quadruple whammy and it's crushing the market, crushing the housing market. But exactly what I expected to happen when I said that when rates get to 7% as a support, then it's going to be the beginning of the housing market. But the other thing is the buying back stocks, buying shares. They're doing that to increase their earnings per share, and so that's that's kind of a not necessarily a good thing for the company. It doesn't necessarily mean the company's more profitable. It just means that it helps sometimes when companies feel they're undervalued, they buy their stock back. But now a lot of times they're buying it back even though it's not undervalued. And the optimism is rooted in the expectation that the Federal Reserve is going to start cutting rates.
Right. And they just said that it's too premature to be talking about that. That's what Powell said. That's what the Fed Reserve said.
Well, yeah, but he has to say that. He has to say that because, part of it is he wants to play both sides. But think about it. This is the same guy who for months said that inflation was transitory, until it hit, 9%. That, whoa, inflation is a problem. So I don't think you can't believe anything that comes out of Powell's mouth. I do think that he wants to kind of curb expectations. He doesn't want people to go on this frenzy and then be, what if inflation, ticks up and he has to leave the rates at 5.5, 5.25, 5, or maybe even has to raise another quarter point. I think he wants to leave that door open. But the fact is the markets are saying, we cannot keep it like this. We're already seeing huge weaknesses in the market because the market can't sustain these high interest rates for much longer. And they're pricing it in. So that's why the markets are positive. They expect that the Federal Reserve is going to cut rates as early as March. And that's going to be a real rally for them. But I don't think it's going to help. I don't think it's going to help anything. They've done too much too quickly now, and it was too late. It's way too late. First of all, they're way behind the curve, and then they did too much, and I think it'll be the same in reverse when the economy hits the fan in early next year.
Yeah, and you were just talking about mortgage rates. It says here the mortgage rate has to fall to 5.5%, or the median price home has to fall by 22%, or the median income has to increase to 28% for housing to become affordable, according to Moody.
Yeah. I saw that article, and none of it, of course, is going to happen.
But that is accurate. That's pretty accurate, right?
Well, it's accurate, but it still doesn't bring homes back to 5 years ago. Right. When Trump first took office.
Well, when the collapse happens, how do you foresee prices dropping? Are we going to see cheaper than 2008?
Well, it's hard to say because in a period of stagflation,
Everybody have cash on hand. Cash is king. In a
well,
market
yeah, but
like
not
this.
many people have cash on, and not many people have cash.
Right.
But in a stagflationary environment, the reason why that's so dangerous is the economy is not growing; it's shrinking. But prices continue to rise. Um, you know, some people are still going to have to buy houses now. Do I think that prices will rise? Probably in some areas. I'll bet you Washington D.C. prices continue to rise for homes, but a lot of areas.
California, it's pretty much staying the same. It hasn't really gone down. I mean, I think you're onto something. I think we'll see it in various parts of the country. Obviously, more states than not. And when it hits those places, it's going to hit really hard.
Yeah, yeah. The bubble areas. You remember Miami in 2008 and all of the coastal areas. Those
Arizona is
numbers.
going to really be affected. Like they're the ones. Texas will be affected. Florida will be affected. I mean, yeah, there's a lot. There's quite a few.
Yeah. I mean, you look at some of these areas in the north and the northeast, they weren't so affected. I mean, it was all the housing crash didn't really impact them that much, not nearly the percentages that it was. And, in the bubble towns, the bubble economies like Florida and South Florida, even here in Northwest Florida, I mean, prices were going up. So, on a condos, 50,000 a month, these unsustainable rates of growth, and those will be problematic. But I think other areas, the prices will continue to rise. I mean, it really depends on what the Fed is going to do and what the federal government does as to whether or not we see prices continue to rise in the recession, or could even be a depression. It really depends on what the government does. You can't say we're going to have stagflation. If the government, we may just have hyperinflation, massive inflation, but more government spending. I know why people are thinking, because when you look at they annualized the return of 5.2%. With the third quarter, a GDP growth, but 5.5% of that can be traced back to government spending. And so that means we actually contracted in the private sector 0.3%. The only thing that's keeping the economy afloat is the massive amounts of government overspending. And people just don't see that. And smart people, Professor Siegel from the Wharton School, I was listening to, what's his name, Lancome, the Home Depot guy. I don't know why they don't see that. The only thing good about this economy is for the Keynesians, the Keynesian economists who believe that the government, creates wealth, because the majority of the spending and the sustainment of this economy is coming from the massive deficit spending. That's not a healthy economy, and you can't keep doing it.
Do you think the spending is just going to continue and continue? I mean, it won't stop.
That's the question, $1 million question. I do know this. I mean, if I was to bet, is it going to keep spending? I would say, yeah, hell yes, because there's nothing in the last 100 years to tell me otherwise. Nothing. Certainly nothing in the last 20 years to suggest otherwise. So, yeah, the spending is going to continue. But what happens if we keep doing it? Well, we're just going to accelerate the demise of the U.S. dollar and American standard of living. You just can't keep doing that. Cannot.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't run a massive eventually you got to cry uncle. You can't keep borrowing. No household, no company, no corporation, no government can keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Eventually, you run out of lenders. You run out of people that are going to give you money. And then you'll just become the buyer of first resort. The Federal Reserve will just buy all of our treasuries because nobody's going to buy them. The market is so saturated with U.S. treasuries, people just aren't going to have an appetite for them. And once they stop buying them, and the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve, has to go back in and quantitative easing, buy them up. I mean, now you're just talking about monetizing more trillions of dollars, which is inflation. That is inflation. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You cannot have low inflation and massive government spending and overspending. The two are completely contradictory. That is inflation, when you're spending more than you take in and you're financing it by selling debt and printing dollars to buy that debt. Yes. You can't do that.
How many bailouts are we going to see, you think?
Ugh. You see, that's the other thing.
That's the thing that disgusts me the most. That's the thing that really gets me riled up and upset.
Well, that's why I think the government is going to have to cut the rates, because remember that the emergency bond bailout program that they started back in March to help shore up capital in these banks. is supposed to be paid back here next, early next year. And there's nothing to suggest that the balance sheets of these regional banks got any better. The only thing that will get the balance sheets better is if they lower interest rates, and they're going to have to do it considerably, because when they lower the interest rates, then the value of those bonds that they're holding them will increase. Inverse relationship: the cheaper the interest rate, the yield on a bond, the more expensive or valuable the bond becomes. So the only way for these banks that are holding these treasuries that are not worth anything because the interest rates are so high is for the Federal Reserve to lower the interest rates, so those bonds that they have will be actually back to valuable again, and they can kind of be in the green. But right now they're so deep in the red that they can't afford to lend money out. Hell, in some cases they can't even afford, they could not even, in most cases they could not afford to give all the depositors their money back if they all came in next week and said, I want my money. Most of these banks would not be able to give their people the money. If everybody said, I want my money. You ever see the movie It's a Wonderful Life? Remember that old movie with
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he owns a bank, and then he always run a bank. Everybody always want their money. He's like, come on, George, your money. Yeah, I don't have your money here. Your money's in Sam's house, his mortgage, and your money's in the bank. So the money that people put in the bank gets lent out, and people for businesses. So if you want to come get that money, everybody comes at once. Yeah, if 10% of the people come, yeah, we got the money for you. Here, how much you want? Yeah, we'll give it all to you. But if 60% of depositors come, they don't have the money. See how they go break? They go broke.
And you're noticing how many banks are closing. I mean, there are more banks closing now, especially the smaller ones, than ever before. It is scary stuff.
Yeah, that's why I think that
they're either they're closing, they're going under.
There's so many reasons why the Federal Reserve has to lower interest rates, and there's only one reason why they can't. But that reason can be solved by the fiscal policy. The only reason to say why you have to keep the interest rates high is because of inflation. It's the only way they're going to get inflation down. You've got to discourage people from borrowing and spending money, and you got to suck that money in for the higher interest rate. That's the one. But you know what? They could solve that problem in Washington, D.C. if they just spent only as much as they took in. And then the government wouldn't have to worry about inflation. But inflation is because we have to print too much money to monetize the debt. Government spending is what causes inflation. So they got all these reasons why they should cut interest rates. And the one reason why they shouldn't cut them could be solved by Washington, and that ain't never going to happen. So we're kind of in this quagmire.
Unfortunately, it's going to be interesting to see what happens as time goes on. We'll know a lot more in the coming months. Before we go tonight, big news. Our buddy, our friend, who we really adore and we're praying for, George Santos, 2024. HBO is planning a George Santos movie. This guy is more famous than anybody in Washington. Who else is getting their own movie?
Is somebody going to play George, or is it going to be like a documentary?
Well, listen to this. A movie about the life, lies, and crimes of disgraced GOP Congressman George Santos has already been put in the works at HBO, with Veep executive producer Frank Rich at the helm. The movie will reportedly be based on Mark Chusano's new book, The Fabulous, the lying, hustling, grifting, stealing, and very American legend of George Santos. The film, now in development, is described as a forensic and darkly comic look at the crazy, unprecedented congressional race on Long Island that led to Santos being elected to Congress, noted Deadline. It comes from Frank Rich, who executive produced HBO's Emmy-winning Washington, D.C. satire, Veep. Rich also helped produce the HBO Emmy-winning drama Succession. Wow, dude. Holy shit. The narrative will somewhat model The Great Gatsby, and that follows an outsider who exploits a system to become congressman for one of the wealthiest districts in the United States. Wow. George Santos was expelled, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we know that. Wow, this guy's more famous than all of them. Jesus. Getting his own movie, man. I mean, even though they're ragging on him and they're going after him and they're bashing him, he's still getting his own movie. A movie's a movie, man. Jesus.
I want to know who's going to play George Santos.
God, that's a really good question. Who do we think?
They're looking at some people. I'm going some names like George Salazar. I've never heard these people. Nelson Franklin, Bowen Yang. I've never heard any of these.
George.
They're gonna have him. They're gonna have him
Is he
going
wearing
through his campaign. I got to see it. He'll pull out one of his campaign checks and cash it, and then go get his Botox because he's accused of getting Botox treatments using campaign money. I mean, this guy is unbelievable.
Now, do we think this is the last we'll hear of him, or do you think that he'll get some big gig? Do you think he'll be charged? Like, what do you think's next for George Santos?
I don't know. Maybe George. Maybe he should like play himself in the HBO movie. You know, he could make a couple bucks. Might as well.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's hard to say. I mean, because on the one hand, you know, when these people reach that level of narcissism and they're sycophants, that, you know, to be out of the public light. I mean, even though he's been disgraced, they still crave, you know, that attention and be in the public life. So, I personally, though, I don't know how you recover from something like this. I think he ought to spend his days enjoying his freedom, because I think the guy gets convicted and could very well spend some time in jail.
And if you go on social media, the left is still not satisfied. They're still not happy. It's like they want this guy dead. They're
And
not.
many on the right too. I mean, a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, the expulsion wasn't enough. I mean, it never really is enough, though. It's never enough for these people. They always want more. I mean, he's gone. What he's gone. What else could you ask for, guys? You guys. Well, you know, it's so laughable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's certainly not the only person in Washington that belongs behind bars. That's for sure. I don't think that I don't think they should have kicked him out. I would have wanted him to resign, but I would have never voted to kick him out. You know?
Yeah, I think it sends a bad precedent, a bad message, a bad example for the future. And we've talked about this. I think they'll weaponize this going forward. And even Republicans warned about that this is not the right thing to do. And, you know, it's dangerous stuff.
Yeah, these are crazy times, you know, and talking about weaponized, you know, that one vote rule to get rid of the speaker. I wonder if they're going to try to get rid of Johnson with all this going on with this.
Could be interesting. Any final thoughts tonight?
No. Well, I will. One final thought in the sports arena, because I'm not that I really have any dog in the fight, but I am a Floridian, and I do think
I know FSU got robbed in the playoffs.
It was just not good. And I mean, I get all the justification. I just don't think that. I think the justification more supports the idea of putting FSU in. You know, all right, they're playing on their, you know, they didn't have their starting quarterback. They weren't saying that should be all the more reason why they deserve a shot at the title, because they were able to come from, you know, to be able to overcome those odds and the loss of their quarterback, and you know, and go, you know, be an undefeated team, you know, 13-0.
Yeah, amen. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who pulls it out and prevails and wins it all. I'm going with UW. I think.
I'm kind of yeah.
Who do you?
I just don't want it to be Alabama. I don't want it to be Alabama, and you know, I kind of like Texas. I don't want it to be either of the teams that got a loss. You know, because I don't know. I don't think that a team with a loss should get into the Final Four. I think it should be undefeated.
Agreed. And this year they were supposed to start the 12-team playoff, but they're waiting now till next year to do that.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that?
No, I mean, I thought that I thought a long time ago they should have done that. But
instead of 4 next year, it'll be 12.
12, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think 8. Couldn't they do 8? Might be a little better, but definitely not like this. Not when you get 4 and you leave a team like Florida State out.
Yeah, I know. Robbery for sure. Anything else?
That's it, my man.
All righty. Everybody, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. It's been a fantastic show. Another episode of Daily S&M in the books. We will see you all very soon. Until next time, I'm Rory Sauter, Greg Merck. God bless. Much love.